Hey guys, I'm back with a new video. In this video, we will make a full project using React.js. So this project is a simple exercise planner where a user can simply maintain a record of the exercises he or she has completed, the exercises that are pending to be completed, and can even create a new exercise, delete an existing exercise. So let us see the demo for this project. So I'm here on the application and this is our home route. So on the home route you can see our list of exercises. Then here is our filter. So you can check for completed exercises by going to the completed tab, pending exercises. You can toggle an exercise, and once you toggle an exercise from pending to completion, then it shows a green left border. Also you can create a new exercise. So let me say lorem ipsum, add the exercise. And by default, the new exercise is in pending state. Let us toggle it. Now it is in completed state. Check the completed tab and here we have it. Now if I toggle this goes into pending and this stays in the completed, right? Let's again toggle this. And now both of our exercises are in pending state. Now we can also delete an exercise by clicking on delete. Finally, we can also edit our exercise. So let me say changed for this, and click on update exercise, and this works. So for this application I will be providing all the styles. The link for the styles can be found down below in the description section of this video. So I have already created the starter for this React project. So in the starter you can find the basic boilerplate, and here we have our CSS file. So I have already provided them in the starter. The link for the starter files can be found down below in the description of this video. And here's our app.css file. And this is how our starter project looks. So it just says hello React. So now to set up this project onto your system, so all you have to do is to go into the main project folder and run the command npm install. Now once you are done with the installation of the packages, all you have to do is to run the command npm run start to start the project. Next, let us quickly decide a couple of components that we will need for this application. First, we will need 3 page components, namely the home page component, the create exercise component, and the edit exercise component. So these will be our 3 page components. Now it is on the home page component that we will render filter navigation. So this will be our home page. And here we will have our filter navigation, which will have 3 tabs: view all, completed, and pending. And here we will have a navigation bar with 2 buttons, so home and create exercise. So this will be our navbar component. Now this entire thing will be our base filter component. And this will allow us to check for our completed and pending exercises. Then beneath this we will render our list of exercises. So exercises list. Now this exercise list itself will be composed of several exercises. So each exercise in turn will be a component. So let me draw a box for this, and each exercise will be a component. So exercise item. So we will have a couple of such exercise items that constitute the entire exercises list. Make sense? So we will be needing 3 page components. So the home page component, the create exercise component, and the edit exercise component. So in total 3 page components. And then we will also be needing 4 other components. So the navigation bar component, then this base filter component, then the exercises list component, and our exercise item component. Next, let us see how our create exercise and edit exercise component looks. So let me clear the canvas first. Next, our create exercise screen will be something like this. So here we will have our navigation bar. So home and create exercise. So we will have these two buttons in our navigation bar. Then beneath that we will have our form with two input fields. So one will be for title and the second one will be for details. And then beneath that we will have our button right inside the form which says add exercise. Now once the user submits a title and detail for the exercise and clicks on add exercise, we will make a API call and we will commit the new exercise in our local JSON store that we will set up for this application. And from that local JSON store, we will fetch all our exercises and render them on the home page. Make sense? Now similarly to the create exercise component, we will have the edit exercise component. Now this will also be a page component and this will also have the navigation bar at the top. So home and create exercise. So this is our navigation component, so navbar component. So each of our 3 page components will be reusing this navigation bar. Make sense? The same form that we defined for create exercise, we will be using that for edit exercise as well. So here also we will have title and details. So in this case the form will be populated with the exercise that we want to edit, and we will also have a button right here which says update exercise. So in this case the user will either change the title or the details and then click on update exercise. Again we will make a API call and this time it will be a patch request and we will look for that specific resource in our JSON store and update the resource. And the change that happens in the local JSON store will get reflected in our UI as well. So this was everything regarding the components and the pages that we will be creating in this application. So without a further ado, let us start creating this project. Now I am already running our local development servers by running the command npm run start, and it is running on the port 3000. As you can see. Now we will also be using the JSON Server package for our project. So head over to the terminal and install the JSON Server package globally. So I have already installed it globally onto my system. So to install it, all we have to say is npm install JSON Server -g for global and press enter. So this will install the JSON Server onto your system as a global package. And then to start the JSON Server, you can run the command JSON-server and then use the watch flag to watch or monitor the changes to our JSON file which is there in our store folder. As you can see in the src folder, in the src folder we have the store folder and data.json, and let us use a port of 3111. So this will give us a REST API and will give us a route using which we can work with the exercises that we will have in this JSON file, right? So press enter. So now our JSON server is running. Let us start working on the project. Now let us start with our home page component. So go right inside the pages folder and create a new file, homepage.jsx. So to scaffold a new component, so I will be using this extension ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets to create my scaffolds for the components that I will be creating in this application. Now once you have installed the VS Code extension, type RSC and press tab, and this gives you a functional component. So it first imports React from React and then it gives a boilerplate code for our functional component which returns some JSX. And down here we are exporting the homepage component as a default. Now inside here I need to set up a state for this component. So let us make use of the useState hook. So let us import useState from React to set up a state, and as a very first step we need to import this at the top. Now to use it we need to go right inside our component function. So within the function body, and we type useState. Now as an initial value let us pass an empty array, and the invocation to this useState function gives us exactly two things. So a state and a state updating function or a handler to change this piece of state. So we are using array destructuring here. So we get a state. So let us name it as exercises. And then a state updating function to change that state. So by convention, we name the state updating function using the prefix set, and then we add it to the name of our state, which in this case is exercises. So for exercises, we name it as set exercises. Make sense? Now as the next step, we need our data source, and currently it is there inside the data.json file that we created just a while back. So to fetch that data into our application, all we need to do is to make an async call or an HTTP request. So to trigger an async call, for this we need another React hook, which is the useEffect hook, and it is here we will place our code to make an HTTP request to our JSON server. So first we need to import it at the top of our file. So right here put a comma and import useEffect, and then go down here and use the useEffect hook. Now the useEffect hook takes on exactly two arguments, takes another argument which is our list of dependencies. So let us keep it as empty because we have no dependencies to begin with. Now inside our callback function is where we will define our HTTP request or our async call. Now our local JSON server is already running. So you can see this gives us a URL to which we can make request to fetch the exercises right inside our homepage component. So which is this URL. Let me copy this. Now our local development server is also running. So let us go to our useEffect hook and let us make our async call. So here we will make use of the fetch API to initiate our API call. So let us make use of the async await syntax. So let's create a new function inside our callback function and let's name it as fetch exercises. So make sure to decorate your function with this async keyword because it is here we will be putting our API call. Now right inside the fetch exercises function, let us wrap our async call code with a try catch block. So try catch. Next, inside the try block, let us make a fetch API call. So fetch and put the URL http://localhost 3000, not 3000, 3111 /exercises. Now this fetch call will return us a promise. So let us make use of the await keyword to maintain a pause here. So this is a checkpoint basically, and let us store this in a variable which we call as response. Next we need to parse the response JSON that we get back, and here also we need to make use of the await keyword. So await response.json. Now this is an asynchronous operation as well, which takes some time to complete, just like the fetch call that we made above. So let us store the return thing in a variable and let's name it as data, or better, let us say it as fetched exercises. Now before working with the return data, let us first log this to the console. So console.log. Here are the exercises that we fetched exercises. Now before giving this a whirl, we need to set a React router in our project. So head over to the terminal, and to install React router, let us run the command npm install react-router-dom and press enter. So I already have it installed in my project, so I won't be running this command, but make sure to run the command because we will be using React router as well for our application. Now once you are done with the installation of the React Router DOM package, head over to index.js file and import a few things from the React Router DOM package. So right here, we need to import a couple of things from React Router DOM. So first we need to import the browser router, and let us use an alias as router. And we also need a couple of imports, but those are not required in this file. We will be needing them in the app component. So all we have to do here is to wrap our app component with the router. So let me remove this, and here let us add a router tag, and here pass the app like this. Next let us head over to our app component and import switch and route components from React Router DOM. Now it is here we will be defining the routes that we will be needing for our application. So we need to wrap our routes inside this switch component. So let me remove this h1 now. And next let us define a route for the home page component. So let us make use of the route component here. So route. Now here we need to configure a couple of props for the route component. First we need to specify the path at which the home page component should be loaded. So let us say path as /home. So it is here I want to load the component. So we first need to import the component at the top. So here let us say home page and let me import it right at the top. So this auto imports the home page component for me at the top. Next, within our route component, we need to pass it like this. And now let us set the exact prop for the exact match. So I want when the user visits the route, the domain name /home and the path that the user types is an exact match with this one, then the home page component should get loaded into the browser. Now with this route in place, let us go back to our home page component and commit the fetched exercises to our state for the home page component. So to commit the fetched exercises to our state, we need to invoke our state updating function. So set exercises and pass the fetched exercises. Now before we give this a preview, we also need to invoke the fetch exercises function down below so that it runs immediately as the component loads. So fetch exercises. So right here. Now let us give this a preview. So here let us go to the route /home and press enter. So here are the exercises that we are fetching from our local JSON store. Next we are also getting a warning which says switch is defined but never used. So let us head over to our app component and use the switch component as well. And then grab this route and place it within the switch tags like this. Okay, so everything still works. So now our exercises are getting logged to the console and we have also successfully committed our exercises in the state for the home page component. So in order to verify that, click on more tabs and components and then click on home page right here. And here you can see our state is now getting populated with the exercises that we are fetching from our local JSON store. So currently we are having only this single exercise that is getting populated in the state of our home page component. And we also have an effect function which we defined for fetching the exercises on the load of the component. Make sense? Now let us also add some code in the catch block in our home page component. So right here. So here I will just log the error for now. So console.log error. So with that out of the way, as a next step, I would like to create a new component inside the components folder and name it as exercises list. So inside the components folder, create a new component exercises list.jsx. So what you need to do here is that whatever exercises that we got from our JSON server, we need to pass them as props to the exercises list component and render those exercises there. So feel free to try this on your own first and click play to check out my solution. So let us try this out. So right here, let us quickly scaffold our React functional component. So RFC, press tab, and let me add this export right here, exercises list. Now here we expect a prop which we'll pass later, and that prop is exercises. So we'll receive that prop on the props object. So as a first check, if our exercises that we receive as a prop is an empty array, then let us simply return null, because in that case we don't want to render anything. So if the exercises that we receive on the props object has a length of 0, then let us simply return null. Otherwise let us return a UL, and inside this UL let us map over the exercises. So on the props object we have the exercises, and since we know that exercises is an array which we are fetching right here, we can use the map method on it. So to map over the exercises, and for each exercise let us create an li element and interpolate the title for each exercise like this. Now here, while iterating over the list of items, we also need to pass a special key prop. So let us pass that as well on our list item. So right here we need to pass a key prop, and set this to a unique identifier. So for this case, we can use the ID. So exercise.id. So if you see here, each exercise that we have in our exercises array has these 4 properties, and we also have a ID, right? So we can use that as a key prop. So now in order to try this, we need to go to our homepage component, which is exactly where we want to render this list of exercises. So it is here I want to display the list of exercises. So let us add the component tag for exercises list. So exercises list, and make sure to import it at the top. So import exercises list from /components exercises list, and here we can use it. Now finally, before trying this out, we also need to pass our exercises piece of state as a prop. So which is this thing that we are setting right here. So once we are done with our API call, on the load of this component, we set our piece of state by invoking the state updating function. We pass the fetched exercises, it commits the fetched exercises to our state, and it re-renders our homepage component. So let me grab this exercises piece of state and pass it as a prop right here. So exercises, and set this to our exercises state. So it is here we pass them as props down to our exercises list component. The exercises list component receives the exercises prop. On the props object, we check for the length of the exercises array. If that comes out to be 0, we return null. Otherwise, we map over the list of exercises and spit out an li for each of the exercises that we have in our exercises array. Make sense? So it is inside the exercises list component where we are mapping over the exercises that we receive as props. So let us give this a preview in the browser. So now you can see our warning is also gone and our exercises are getting rendered in the browser. So currently we are having only one single exercise, but we will see later how we can create a new exercise. So currently this looks ugly, but we'll soon get there. So no worries for now. Now let us create our exercise item component. So head over to the components folder and create a new component, exercise item.jsx. So let us quickly scaffold our React functional component, and let me export it down here. So instead of rendering the single exercise item in the exercises list component, just like what we are doing currently, so we are rendering each individual exercise item within the exercises list component. Let us now render it in the exercise item component. So feel free to try this on your own. So right inside the exercise item component, I expect to get a prop which would be a single exercise. So on the props object, and let me cut this li and paste it right here, and remove this key prop. So now here we expect to get the exercise as a prop on the props object. So props.exercise.title. Now we need to make sure that we pass the exercise as a prop to the exercise item component. But before that, let us create the full template for exercise item. So currently we are only rendering the title of the exercise, which is not the only thing that we want to render for an exercise. So let us change the markup for each exercise item. So here let us define our new JSX. So let me remove this li, and let us first add a div with the class name of exercise. So in JSX, we don't have a class attribute because class is a reserved word in JavaScript. So we have an equivalent for it, which is class name. Same goes for the for attribute that we use on a label. For that we have an equivalent HTML for, which we'll see a bit later. And inside this div, let us add a div with the class of actions. Now inside this div with the class of actions, let us add an h4 and interpolate the exercise that we get on the props object and access the title on it to render that in the h4. Next we will add a couple of icons to delete an exercise, edit an exercise, and to toggle an exercise completion status, but that is something we will do later, so no worries for now. For now, just add a simple div with the class of buttons. Next, right after this div with the class of actions, let's add a div with the class of details. And inside it, let us add a p tag, and within it, let us interpolate the exercise details. So props.exercise.details. Now to see this in action, we need to pass our exercise prop to the exercise item component. So go back to our exercises list. So it is here we want to use our exercise item component. So import it at the top. And then we need to pass the exercise that we are currently on as a prop to the exercise item component. So you could use a different name for the prop as well, but let's go with exercise. So in essence, what we are doing here is that we are mapping over the exercises that we receive as props from the homepage component in the exercises list component, and for each exercise that we get in the map method, we pass that exercise as a prop to the exercise item component, and it is here we render the exercise title and the exercise details. So if we have 5 exercises in total that we got from our local JSON store, then we pass those 5 exercises as props to the exercises list component, and we map over those 5 exercises to spit out 5 exercise item components, with each exercise item component having its separate exercise prop and its own exercise. Make sense? So with this in place, let us give this a preview in the browser. So here you can see everything works, but we are getting a warning in our console which says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Okay, so I forgot to pass the key prop. So here we need to set a key prop and set this to exercise.id and then give this a preview. So now it's gone. So this is what we get. Let us quickly add some styles. So you can find these styles on the GitHub repo of this project. So create a new file inside the components folder and name it as exerciseitem.css. So grab the styles from the repo and paste them right here in the exerciseitem.css file. Now in order to see these styles in effect, let's import this file right inside the exercise item component file. So right down here, import /exerciseitem.css, and now let us give this a preview. So this is how it looks at the moment. Now I have also prepared some styles for exercises list component, so you can grab them from the repo as well. So let us go to our exercises list component, and here let us switch from UL to a div and add a class of exercises list, and also add a new CSS file. So exercises list.css, and add this rule for exercises list, and then back to our exercises list component, we need to import the CSS file for exercises list. So exercises list.css. So with this in place, let us give this a preview in the browser. And this is how it looks now. So this looks real good. Now as a next step, let us add a new functionality. And what I want here is that when someone clicks on a delete button pertaining to some exercise, I want to remove that clicked exercise from our list of exercises. So let us go right inside our exercise item component and add a button that does this deletion. So right here inside the div with the class of buttons, let us add a simple button to delete an exercise, and let us add an on-click prop to it and set this to a function. Let us name it as perform exercise deletion, and here let us say delete. So right here let us define our perform exercise deletion function, and it is here I will call a function that we will be defining inside our homepage component. So the idea here is that we'll be passing a pointer to the function that will perform the actual deletion of our exercise down from the homepage component to this exercise item component. So let me explain this on the whiteboard. So first we have our homepage component, and then within the homepage component we have our exercises list component. So homepage exercises list, and inside the exercises list we will have our exercise item components. So each of our exercise item components will have this delete button. Now to basically provide the functionality for deletion, we need to define a deletion handler, right? So inside our homepage component, so all the exercises that we fetch from our local JSON store are managed as state within our homepage component. And inside the homepage component, we will define our delete handler. Now it is this function that we will pass as a pointer to the exercises list component first and then to our exercise item component. So in the end we will be receiving the delete handler function as a prop on the props object that we receive in the exercise item component, and then using the pointer that we receive as a prop we can invoke this delete handler function. And once this gets triggered, this item will get removed from our list. Make sense? So enough of talking, let us see this in action via code. So inside our perform exercise deletion function is where I will call a function that we will be defining inside our homepage component, just as I discussed. So the idea here is that we will be passing a pointer to the function that will perform the actual deletion of our exercise. So we are going to pass that function as a pointer down from homepage component to the exercise item component via the exercises list component. So now we are crystal clear with the process that we will be following. On the props object, I expect to get a pointer to a function with the name on delete exercise, and to it we will pass the ID of the exercise that is to be deleted, which of course we can get from the props object as well. So props dot exercise, and on the exercise we have the ID property. Now all we have to do is to pass a pointer to the function that does this deletion. So head over to the homepage component, and in there let us define a function and name it as delete exercise handler. So right here in our homepage component, let us define a function delete exercise handler, and this expects an ID of the exercise that is to be deleted. So let me pass it like this. So in here is where our actual logic goes for the deletion of exercise. So as the very first step, let us access the exercises that are there in our state, and on it let us call the filter method, and for each exercise we need to check whether the ID of the current exercise matches with the ID that we are looking for. So we need to negate this check to use a bang, and this gives us all exercises apart from the one that is to be deleted. Make sense? So let me store this in a variable and let's call it as patched exercises. So now we are done with the removal of the exercise. Let us commit the patched exercises to the state of our homepage component. So here we need to invoke the set exercises state updating function, and to it we need to pass the patched exercises like this. So we are still not done. As a next step we need to pass a pointer to this function that we just defined down as a prop, first to the exercises list component and then further down from it to the exercise item component, where we actually want to run this via that pointer on the click of the button. Make sense? So right here let us add a prop and let's name it as on delete exercise, and the name of the prop should match with this one which we are using right here, and let us set this to delete exercise handler. So we are forwarding a pointer to this function down to our exercises list in the very first step. So now we need to forward or basically do the same in the exercises list component. So within our exercises list component we expect to receive an on delete exercise prop, and this prop itself holds a pointer to our delete exercise handler function. So let me wrap this in curly braces, and this we receive on the props object. And now we need to further forward it down to our exercise item component. So let us define a new prop for this, on delete exercise, and then we forward the received pointer down to our exercise item component. So it is finally here where we are invoking the delete exercise handler function that is sitting in our homepage component via this prop on delete exercise, which holds a pointer to the function that we want to invoke. So with this in place, let us give this a preview in the browser. So if I click on the delete button, you can see the exercise is now gone, and you can see this works at least from the UI standpoint. But if we check our local JSON store, you can see that the exercise that we just deleted is still there in our local JSON store. So we need to delete the exercise from our JSON store as well. So for that, let's come back to our perform exercise deletion function, where we are calling the onDelete exercise, and prior to this, let us first make our fetch API call to localhost 3111 exercises, and to target this specific exercise, we need to use its ID, so props.exercise.id, and here we need to make a simple delete request, so use a new object as the second argument and set the method to delete. Now this will return us a promise, and once that gets fulfilled, it is then I want to call the onDelete exercise prop or the delete exercise handler via this prop. So let me use an arrow function and place this line of code right inside here, like this. And then let us add a catch block to handle error if one occurs. So .catch error console.log error. So if everything goes well, the exercise that we click on should first get deleted from our local JSON store, and then the deletion should get reflected in our UI as well. Make sense? So let us give this a whirl. So if I click on delete button, you can see the exercise is now gone. And let us check our local JSON store as well. And you can see now our exercises property is an empty array. So you can see that now our clicked exercise first got deleted from the JSON store, and then it gets removed from the UI as well. Now next, let us head over to our exercise item component and there add a new button. And with this button, we will toggle the completion status of the exercise just like we saw in the demo. So in essence, if the exercise is completed, then we will show a green left border, else if it is in the pending state, then we will show a red left border. Make sense? So right here, let us add a button, and with the click of the button, we want to toggle the completion status of the exercise. So let us add an onClick prop. And set this to a function. Let us name it as perform exercise toggle, and let us say toggle here. So right here, let us define our perform exercise toggle function, and it is here I will call a function that we will be defining inside our homepage component. So the approach will be quite similar to the one that we followed for exercise deletion. Here also we will be passing a pointer to the function that will perform the actual toggling of the completion status of the exercise down from the homepage component to the exercise item component via that exercise list component. Now before writing the logic for this function, let us head over to our homepage component. Right here in the homepage component, let us define a function toggle exercise completion handler, and this expects an ID of the exercise for which we want to toggle the completion status. So let us first log the ID to the console. Next, let us make use of the spread operator and make a copy of the exercises that we have in our state. So let us store the new array in a variable and let's name it as cloned exercises. Next, on this cloned exercises array, let us apply the find index method and look for an exercise whose ID matches with the exercise ID that we are looking for. So here we are basically looking for the index of an exercise where the ID of the current exercise that we are on matches with the ID for which the toggle button was clicked, which we will pass to this function in just a minute. So this should give us the clicked exercise index. So remember that the find index method returns us the index at which the element is sitting at and not the element itself. Now to get the element, we can easily access it on our cloned exercises by simply using this index that we got. So cloned exercises and use the square braces and pass the index that we just got. So clicked exercise index, and this will give us the current exercise, or a better name would be the clicked exercise. So it is this exercise for which we want to toggle the completion status. Now the most important part here is that we need to toggle the complete property of the exercise that we got in our hand. So basically if it was true, then it gets changed to false and vice versa. So clicked exercise dot complete and set this to a bang clicked exercise dot complete like this. So here we are just negating the value of the complete property that we have on the exercise on the click of the button. So if it was false earlier, then with this bang it will turn to true, and we will update the complete property for our clicked exercise. And finally, let us commit our updated exercises back to our state. So for this we need to invoke our state updating function, which is set exercises, and pass the cloned exercises variable like this. Now this function will not work because we are missing the connection. Now by connection I mean that the exercise item component doesn't have the handle to call this function to basically carry out the toggling task. So what do we need to do here? The answer is simple. So we need to pass a pointer to this function as a prop down to our exercise item component via the exercises list component. So let us go right down in our JSX and add a new prop. So right here let us add our prop. So let us name the prop as on toggle exercise and set this to toggle exercise completion handler. So here we are just passing a pointer to the function that we just created. So the toggle exercise completion handler. Remember, we don't need to invoke it, otherwise it will immediately get triggered on the render of this component, which definitely we don't want. Now let us go right inside our exercises list component. Now right here we expect to receive a onDelete exercise prop that holds a pointer to our toggle exercise completion handler. So we just need to forward the prop down to our exercise item component. So for the prop, let me again use the same name, on toggle exercise, and set this to props.onToggle exercise. So basically the on toggle exercise prop that we are receiving inside this component, and we are forwarding that prop to our exercise item component via this prop, which is on toggle exercise. Now we need to go to our exercise item component. So here on the props object, I expect to get a pointer to a function with the name of on toggle exercise that we just passed, and to it we will pass the ID of the exercise for which the completion status is to be toggled, which of course we can get from the props object as well. So props.exercise.id. So now we are already passing this on toggle exercise prop down to the exercise item component, and this should essentially now run this logic which toggles the completion status of the exercise. So now this connection is made and we are passing the exercise ID to our toggle exercise completion handler that we receive right here. So this should work now, isn't it? So let us give this a whirl, but before that we need to do one simple thing. Let us head over to our exercise item component, and here I want to leverage the complete property of a exercise. So if the exercise for which the toggle button was clicked has a complete property of true, then I want to give this div a class of complete right here, right after this exercise. So basically I want to give an extra class in that case. So to do that, let us create a classes array right here and set this to exercise to begin with. So with just one class. Now if the exercise complete property, so basically the exercise that we are receiving as a prop has a complete property of true. So if that is the case, then we can add a new class to our classes array and let us say it as complete. Now this complete class, if you see in the styles, gives a border left of 10 pixels solid green. So we can use it right here on the div Now to apply the classes here, let me use the curly braces and define a JavaScript expression. So classes dot join at single quotes and give a space because I want this separator between these two classes if the complete property of the exercise comes out to be true. Make sense? So now let us give this a whirl. So if I click on the toggle button, you can see the left border changed its color from pink to green. So you can see this does work, at least from the UI standpoint, but there is a small problem. Do you know what that problem is? The problem is that the toggle that we made was only limited to the UI, and that toggle that we made didn't got reflected in our JSON store. So let me show you this. We changed the toggle status in the UI from false to true, but it is still false in our data.json file. So our toggle didn't got reflected in our JSON store. So we need to make sure that it does get reflected in the local JSON store as well. So for this, let us first reach out to our JSON store via a fetch API call. So right inside our exercise item component, in our perform exercise toggle function, we need to make a fetch call to http://localhost 3111/exercises, and here let us interpolate the exercise that we receive on the prop and access the ID property on it. So we want to target this exercise via its ID and toggle the completion status for this exercise first in our local JSON store and then reflect those changes in our UI. And here, instead of the put request that is used to update the entire resource, I want to make a patch request because I want to update just a part of our resource, essentially the complete property. Okay, so the resource in our case is exercise. Now as the second argument to our fetch call, we need to pass in some options. So pass a new object, and here as the first property we need to define method, which in our case would be patch. Then we need to define our headers. So headers, set this to an object, and I will pass just a single header, which is content type, and set this to application JSON. Now the next property that we need to pass in the options object is the body property. So body, set this to JSON.stringify, and to this object we just need to pass the property or the change that we want to make. So complete, so I want to toggle the complete property for the exercise that I am targeting and basically negate it. So props.exercise.complete. So we are serializing this object or the change that we want to make using JSON.stringify and just specify the patch that we want to make, which is in the complete property. Also don't forget to put this bang right before props.exercise.complete. Now this fetch API call will return us a promise. Now once that gets resolved, it is then I want to reflect the toggling of completion status in the UI as well. So here let us tack on a then block, and here we need to pass in a callback function. And this callback function will run when we are done with this entire thing, and it is here we can invoke our toggle exercise completion handler via this prop. So let me place this line right inside our callback function that we have within our then block. Now next to this then block we can also tack on a catch block, and here let us just log the error to the console, if any. Now with this in place, let us give this a preview in the browser to see how it works. So if I click on toggle, you can see the color of the left border changed from pink to green. Let us go back to our local JSON store, and you can see now this turned from false to true. So the change that we made in our UI, that is the toggle that we made for the exercise, also got reflected in our local JSON store. So you can see everything works like a charm. Now as a next step, we want the ability to add a new exercise to our list of exercises. So let us work on that next. So right inside our pages component, let us create a new page component and name it as create exercise. So create exercise.jsx. Now this component will be a very simple one to begin with. So as I just demonstrated in the demo for the project, the create exercise component will just have a title and details field. So the title will be a simple input field, and for details we will have a text area. So for the state we will have title and details, both of which will have an initial value of empty quotes to begin with. And the idea here is that the user should be able to create a new exercise via the form that we present to the user, and once a new exercise is created, we need to commit it to our local JSON store. So now we are extra clear on what we need to do. If you want to pause the video and try this on your own, feel free to do so and then click to play. So let us scaffold our create exercise component real quick. But before that, let me add a new route for this in the app component. So right here, let me copy this and paste it down below and change the path to create -exercise. And it is on this path I want to render our create exercise component that I will scaffold in just a minute. So right here, let us quickly add some boilerplate code for our component. So RSC and press tab and name the component as create exercise. Now let me also import it in our app component, and here I can import it from the pages folder. So let me copy this and paste it down below and change this to create exercise, and here let us just say create exercise. So let us give this a preview in the browser to see if this loads or not. So here create exercise and press enter, and you can see our h1 element is getting rendered on our create exercise view pertaining to this route. Now as the very first step, let us add a CSS file for create exercise.jsx. So the link for the CSS file for create exercise can be found down below in the description of this video. So here let us add a new CSS file, create exercise.css, and paste the copied styles right here. Now in order to see these styles in action, we need to import our CSS file right here. So /create exercise.css. Now the link for all the CSS files that I will be using in this video can be found down below in the description of this video. Now inside this component function, as the very first thing, let us set up our component state. So let us make use of the useState hook. So here we first need to import the useState hook. So if I say useState, now this useState hook would give us exactly two things which I can grab using array destructuring. So the state and a state updating function. So for the state, let me name it as exercise. And for the state updating function, I will name it as set exercise. Now to this useState invocation, we also need to pass an initial state. So what should our initial state look like? If you see, each exercise has three properties: the title, details, and complete. So for a new exercise, we will set the complete property to false. So we don't need to consider it right here. So here let us pass a new object and use title as empty quotes and details as empty quotes like this. So this is our initial state for the exercise. Now right here, let us define the JSX for the component. Here I just want to return a form with exactly two fields. One is for tapping the title from the user and the other one is for tapping the details from the user. So add a form element and remove this action attribute. So let us first add a label for title and remove this HTML4 attribute. So here let us say title. Now right next to it, add an input with the type of text, and here we also need to set up two props for two-way data binding. So one is the onChange prop, and what it does is that it listens for the changes on our input field, and whatever the user types is what gets reflected in our state. But for this we need to define an onChange handler function for it. So let us name it as handle change. So this is something I will define in just a minute. Next we need a value prop and we need to set this to exercise.title. So whatever value we have in the state for title, we are feeding that to the input field. So in essence, with the onChange and value prop, we are able to make this bidirectional mapping possible. Make sense? Now before defining the onChange handler, let us quickly add a text area next to this input field. So first, let us have a label which says details and add a text area element right next to it. So here we need to set a name attribute of details to it. Let us remove the ID and keep these two attributes the same. Now let us add our pair of props. So the value prop, set this to exercise.details, and the onChange prop, again setting this to our same handler function that I will be defining in just a minute. So handle change. Also make sure to add required on the two fields so that we have the default HTML validation for our form controls. If you do want a separate video on form validation, let me know in the comments section down below. So make sure to hit the like to this video and I will definitely upload it next. So back to where we were. Next to this text area, let us add our button that says add exercise. Also, let us add one more attribute on our input element. I want the max length for the title to be 15. Now let us go right at the top and add our onChange handler function. So const handle change, and this will receive the event object that was raised, and here we need to set our data that is there in the state, namely the title and the details. So essentially we want to feed in the values that the user types in these two fields to our state. So this is what we do with the onChange handler. So to our set exercise state updating function, let us pass a new object, and first let us use the spread operator to spread all the properties that we have on our state. So dot exercise, and then to update them we can use the name attribute for each of the two fields that we have. So on the input field I'm missing the name attribute. Let me add it real quick. So title. So back to where we were, we can use the name attribute for each of our two fields that we have, and we can use it because the name attribute that we have on our two fields matches with the property names that we have in our state. So title, and here also we say title, and same for details. So here we can use the computed property syntax and we can set the target of the event, which is either the input field or our text area, and access it using the name property, and we can set the incoming values by accessing the value property on the event target like this. And with this single line we are pulling the typed values and feeding it to our state. Make sense? Now we are still not done yet. As the next step, let us add the form submission handler. So essentially the idea here is to create a new exercise by tapping the values that the user types in these two fields and create a new exercise out of it. It is this new exercise that we want to submit to our local JSON store. So feel free to try this on your own first. So let us try this out. So as the very first step, here on the form element, we need to set a special prop on our form element, which is the onSubmit prop. So when the user submits this form, I want to run a function. So let us name this as handle exercise creation. So let us go right at the top to define this new function. So right here, let us define our form submission handler. So handle exercise creation, and set this to an arrow function, and this will receive the submit event that gets raised. Now to prevent the default behavior of form submission, we need to invoke the prevent default method on the event object. So event.prevent default like this. So essentially we don't want the browser default, and instead we want to make a post request to create a new resource in our local JSON store. So right here, let us create our payload that we want to submit to our local JSON store. So let us name this as new exercise and set this to an object. Now here we need to set up a couple of properties. So let us first set the title and set this to the title that we get from our state, which we can access on the exercise object, or precisely the exercise state. Then details, exercise dot details. Next, let us set the complete property to false to begin with, and then we need an ID. So let us generate a random ID by using the math library, but you could also use a separate package for it like UUID. So ID math.floor math.random into 10,000. So let us log the new exercise to the console. Here is the new exercise like this, and let us give this a whirl. So here is our form for create exercise, and let me select the components tab and click on create exercise. So here you can see our state, which we are managing using React hooks. So we have title and details currently set to empty quotes. Now if I here type a new value for title, say lorem ipsum, you can see the new values are getting reflected in our state that we are managing in the component. And for the details, let me add lorem ipsum as well, and you can see even that is getting reflected in the state. Now if I click on add exercise, currently this will not work, but this will log the new exercise object in the console. So here let us click it, and you can see we are getting title, lorem ipsum, details, complete property, and the ID. So you can see this does works. Now back to our create exercise component. As a next step, we need to make a fetch API call to make a post request and submit our newly created exercise to the local JSON store. So fetch, and the URL in this case would be just http://localhost 3111/exercises. And then as the second argument, we need to pass an object, an options object. So here we need to set up a couple of properties. So set the method to post. Then for the headers, let us set a new object. So content type, and set this to application JSON. And lastly, we need the body property. And to it, we need to attach our new exercise. So we need to serialize this exercise, json.stringify, and pass the new exercise like this. Now this fetch call will return as a promise. So tack on .then and add a callback function inside it. So once this promise gets resolved, the callback within our then block will get triggered. So here we can simply push the user back to the home page. So once the new exercise is created, in order to show them to the user, we can redirect the user back to the home page where we present all the exercises to the user. So to redirect the user to the home page, we need to use a special React Router hook, which is useHistory. So let us first import it at the top. So here let us say import useHistory from React Router DOM. And here as a first step, we need to set up a history object. So const history, and call the useHistory function, and this will give us a history object. So here let us use the history object, and on this history object we have the push method to redirect the user to our home page. So /home. So right after the redirect, the React Router will load the page component corresponding to the /home route, which is our home page component. Next to our then block, let us tack on a catch block. And if our promise gets rejected, then we can log the error to the console. So console.log error. So to see this in action, let us give this a preview and try creating a new exercise. So here let us say lorem ipsum and lorem ipsum, and click on add exercise. So now you can see we successfully got redirected to our home page component, and this new exercise got added to our list of exercises, and everything works as you can see. Next, let us work on our navbar component. So right inside the components folder, create a new file and name it as navbar.jsx. So right here, let us quickly scaffold our navbar functional component. So type rsc and press tab and name this as navbar. Next, I've already prepared some styles for the navbar. The link to download them can be found down below in the description. So go right inside the components folder and create a new file, navbar.css, and add those copied styles right here. Now in order to see those styles in action, we need to import the CSS file right here, import.navbar.css. Now to define the links that we will have in our navbar that I showed in the demo, which are the home and the create exercise links, I will be using the navlink component that we can get from React Router DOM. So here let us import navlink from React Router DOM. Now right here, instead of this div element, let us add a nav element, and to it let us first add a class of main nav. So class name main-nav. Now right here I want two navigation links right next to each other in the center. So let us first add our navigation link for the home page component. So navlink. So to configure the navlink, we need to add two props here. First is the toProp, which specifies to which component should the user be taken to when someone clicks on this navlink. Then as the second prop, let us add a special prop called as active class name. So for the toProp, we need to set this to /home and a special prop active class name. And what it does is that it gets the styles that we define when the navlink that the user clicks becomes active. So let us set this to our class of active style. So this is for our home page component, and here let us say home. Then let me duplicate the above navlink and paste it down below. And here change the toProp and set this to create-exercise and the text as well to create exercise. Now lastly, all we have to do is to render the navigation bar at the top in each of our views or page components. So for that, we need to head over to the app component, and right above this switch component where we are switching between views on different routes, right above it we need to add our navigation bar component. So navbar, and make sure to import it at the top. So import navbar from /components/navbar. So now let us save the changes and give this a preview, and this is how it looks. So now you can see we can easily switch between different views on the click of these navigation links. Now let us work on editing exercises next. So let us create a new page component and name it as edit exercise.jsx. So go ahead and copy the entire code that we wrote in create exercise.jsx and paste it into this new file. So here we have our useState hook. We are also importing the CSS file. The same styles will be applied here as well that we have in our create exercise, and then change the name of our component from create exercise to edit exercise here, and down here as well where we are exporting it. Now we don't need to change anything inside our handle change function and the form. Now coming to the form submission handler, instead of creation, here we need to update a specific exercise that the user clicks on. So instead of handle exercise creation, the name should be handle exercise updation. So each of the exercise items that we are rendering on the home page component will have a router link, which when gets clicked will take the user to this edit exercise page component. But before adding such a router link, let us first add a route that takes us to the edit exercise page component. So head over to our app component and add such a router link. So here let us add a new route for edit exercise page component. So let me copy this and paste it down below. So the route for this is a bit different from the usual routes that we defined till now. So I will set this to /exercises/:id/edit. Now this :id thingy represents a dynamic segment, so this id thing can take any value, so it is kind of a placeholder, and this id will prove quite useful when we come to the actual implementation of editing of an exercise. Now let us go right inside the exercise item component and right below the delete button, add a router link for each of our exercise items that are being rendered. So the idea here is that when user clicks on edit exercise button pertaining to some exercise item, we want to take the user to the edit exercise form, and then once the user jumps to the edit exercise page, we want to extract the ID from the router params and then fetch the exercise from the local JSON store pertaining to this ID and populate the form fields with the data that we get. I hope this makes perfect sense. So let us add such router link first. So right here, let us add the router link. Now we need to import this special link component from React Router DOM. So import link from React Router DOM, and we want that this router link takes us to the edit page pertaining to the exercise for which the user clicks on this router link. Now we need to configure this link by passing a toProp and set this to curly braces, and then use the backticks, so slash exercises slash, and then it's important to get the exercise ID so we can extract it from our exercise prop. So props.exercise.id. So to interpolate the ID, we are making use of the template strings, and then let us say slash edit, and let us set the text for the link to edit. Now let us try this out, and if I click on this edit, we are taken to slash exercises slash 5906 slash edit. So you can see the link works fine. Now as a next step, we need to extract this ID from the router params and fetch the exercise pertaining to this ID that we get in the router params. So we need to fetch the exercise pertaining to this ID and populate the form with the title and details of that exercise. So head over to the edit exercise component and import the useEffect hook as a first step. So here let us add a comma, useEffect from React. Now the idea here is that right when our component loads, I want to fetch the exercise pertaining to the exercise ID that we get from router params. So for this, we can make use of the useEffect hook. And as a first argument, we need to pass a callback, so the effect callback, and a list of dependencies. But the real question is how we can extract this dynamic ID from the router params, another hook. If you think so, then you are right. So go right at the top and import a special hook, and this time from React Router DOM, useParams. Now right here, let us invoke the useParams function, and this will return us a params object. Now to get this dynamic segment ID of the exercise that I was talking about, so basically this part 119 or the ID part for any exercise, we can access the ID property on the params object. Now make sure that the name that you are using here must match with the name that we defined in app component. So for me, I named the dynamic segment as ID. So let us store the ID in a constant and let's name it as exercise ID. Now back to our useEffect hook, we first need to define a callback function as the first argument and a list of dependencies as the second argument. So right inside the callback function that this useEffect takes, let us make a fetch API call to fetch the exercise pertaining to the ID that we just extracted from router params using this special hook useParams. So here let us say fetch, and again switch to backticks. So localhost 3111 slash exercises, and here let us interpolate the exercise ID that we are getting from router params. Now this fetch call, as we know, returns a promise, so we can tack on .then, and once the promise resolves, we get a response as an argument in our callback function, and let us pass the response that we get using the JSON method, so return response.json. Now this thing itself is an asynchronous operation, so it will also return us a promise as well. Now when this promise resolves, we will get our data. Now this data is what contains the title and details for the exercise that was fetched. So as a very next step, we need to populate our state with the values that we just got so that the inputs can be fed from the state values. Make sense? So call the state updating function set exercise, and to it pass a new object. So set the title to data.title and details data.details like this. Now if something goes wrong, let us tack on a catch block to handle the error case if any. So log the error to the console for the time being. Now for the list of dependencies, I also want to re-execute this fetch call when there is a change in the exercise ID in the route params. So as a list of dependencies, let us pass the exercise ID. So with this in place, let us give this a preview and click on edit exercise. So our form is not getting populated. So the reason for not getting our form populated with the data is that I'm rendering the create exercise component on this path as well. So change this to edit exercise and make sure to import it at the top. And also let us head back to our edit exercise component. And for now, let us just remove this onSubmit handler and give this a preview. So here you can see our form is now getting populated. If I go back to home and select a different exercise, you can see this works. So the exercise for which we click on the router link, which is this one, as you can see in the bottom left corner as well. So the exercise for which we click on the router link gets loaded in the edit exercise component like this. When we click on the router link, we extract the ID from the router params, make a fetch API call and fetch the data and then populate our form. Now as a very next step, let us write a function for handling the updating of the exercise for which we populated our state or for which we populated our form using the fetch API call. So for this we need to define our handle exercise updation function. So let us add the onSubmit back right here. And now let me remove this handle creation function that we got from copying our code from create exercise. So the idea here is that the user will be able to edit the loaded exercise and then submit the form in order to update the loaded exercise in our local JSON store, and then the same update will get reflected in our UI as well. Makes sense? So here let us add a function handle exercise updation. And this will receive the submit event that gets raised. So let us prevent the default behavior of form submission by calling the prevent default method on the event object. Now here let us again reach out to our local JSON store and update the exercise pertaining to our exercise ID that we extracted from router params. So use the fetch API, and here I will use the backticks. So http://localhost 3111/exercises, and then let us interpolate the exercise ID that we got from router params. Now as the second argument for the fetch call, let us pass an options object. So here let us first set the method property to patch. Next for the headers, let us pass the content type header. So set this to application JSON. Lastly, we need a body property. So let us set this to our exercise that we are getting from the state. So by the time this function gets called, we will have the new value that the user wants for the title and details for the loaded exercise in this exercise state, and it is this state that we want to commit to our local JSON store. So JSON.stringify and pass the exercise piece of state, which contains our latest values that we enter in our form. Now we know that fetch API call will return us a promise. So once this promise gets resolved, JavaScript will fire a callback function that we pass to the then block. So inside the callback function, let us make sure that once the exercise is successfully updated, we redirect the user to the home page. So history.push and /home. So to redirect, we need this useHistory hook that we also used in our create exercise component. We create a history object, and then wherever we want to redirect, we call the push method and pass the new route to which we want to push the user. Now if something goes wrong, let us tack on a catch block and here we receive an error if any. So we pass a callback function and this will receive an error if one occurs. So let us log the error to the console. So console.log error. Now one thing more, change this button text to update exercise and then give it a preview. So if I click on edit and change this to triceps and then click on update exercise, you can see now our exercise got updated and the title has now turned to triceps. So you can see this works. Now let us see if the patch that we made also got reflected to our local JSON store. So here's our data.json file and you can see here the title got changed from push-ups to triceps. So you can see this works. Both from our UI standpoint as well as the changes also got reflected in our local JSON store. Now finally, let us create a filter. So here we want to provide the user with the ability to filter out exercises based on the completion status. So if the user wants to see all the exercises, then the filter will be set to all, which will be a string, and it will be our default filter for our application. Next, if the user wants to see only those exercises that have been completed, then in that case we would need to update our filter such that it is set to completed. Else if the user only wants to see those exercises that are pending or not yet complete, then in that case our filter would be set to a value of pending. Make sense? So let us implement the filtering logic so that everything makes more sense. So let us create a new component and name it as base filter.jsx. So right here, let us quickly scaffold our functional component. So RSC and tab and name the component as base filter. Now the link for the styles for this component can also be found down below in the description of this video. So let me paste the styles for this component real quick. So create a new CSS file inside the components folder and name it as base filter.css and paste the copied styles in here. Now head back to base filter.jsx and let us lay out the JSX for this component. Now the first thing is to import the CSS file. So base filter.css. So in the base filter component, I expect to get two props on the props object. So one is the current filter that is active, which we will set up in just a minute, and second is the onUpdate prop, using which we will update our current filter. So the idea here is that our base filter component will have three buttons. So one will be for viewing all the exercises. Then the second button will be for viewing all the completed exercises. And finally, the last button will be for viewing only the pending exercises. So right here, let us change this div to a nav. And inside it, we want three buttons. So first, let us add a class of filter nav. So filter -nav. So let us add our first button. So here we need to set up an onClick prop and set this to an arrow function. So we just need to pass a pointer to the update function that we will define in just a minute. So I expect to receive that update function as a prop. So let's name the prop as onUpdate. So we will be passing this prop from the home page component down to our base filter component. Now to pass an argument, I'm using the arrow function syntax here, and for the first button, let us pass a hard-coded string that says all. Now we will be setting the current filter state in our homepage component, but before that, let us complete the markup for our base filter. So as the text for the button, let us say view all. So on the click of this button, I want to update my current filter to all so that we can see all our exercises. Make sense? Now for our second button, let me duplicate this and paste it down below. Now for the onClick prop, I want to set the current filter to completed in this case, and for the text, let us say completed. Now finally for our third button, let us add the text pending, and here on the click of the button, I want to update my current filter to pending. Now make sure to export the base filter component as a default So now let us head over to the homepage component and add a newly created base filter component there. So right here, let us first import our base filter component at the top. So import base filter from /components/base filter. Now as a next step, let's set up a piece of state for our current filter. Now as a default initial value, I will set this to all. So useState, let us set this to all. And here I will name the state as current filter and the state updating function as set current filter. Which means that if the current filter is set to all, then we want to render all the exercises irrespective of their completion status. So here we are calling the useState function, and to it we are passing our default initial value to begin with, which is all. Now as our next step, let us define a function to change our filter. So once the user wishes to do so, let's name the function as update filter handler. And here we expect to get a new filter. Now to set this new filter, all we have to do is to call our set current filter, which is our state updating function, and pass to it the new filter that we receive as the argument. So new filter like this. Now as a next step, we need to pass our update filter handler as a prop down to our base filter component that we will receive under this name. So let us do that. So back to our homepage component, let us use the base filter right here. Now make sure to import it at the top like we are doing right here. So our prop name is onUpdate. So here let us pass a prop onUpdate and set this to a pointer to the function update filter handler. Then we also need to pass the current active filter. So for this, let us define a new prop and let's name it as current and set this to the current filter that we have in our state. So now we are forwarding both these props down to our base filter component. So let us head back to our base filter component. Now it is via this onUpdate prop that we are able to update our filter with one of these three values. So all, completed and pending. Make sense? So on the click of the button, we call our update filter handler function via this onUpdate prop and we pass the filter that we want to update our current filter with. So this invokes our update filter handler function that we have defined right here. So with this new filter, we call our state updating function to update our current filter with this new filter, and with this state update, our state changes and then our component, the homepage component, re-renders. Make sense? So it re-renders to reflect the updated filter in our UI. Then it is this new filter that we pass as a prop down to our base filter component, and now we can use this current prop in our base filter component to do something. So on our button, let us add a class name attribute for the first button, and here define a JavaScript expression. So if the current filter that we are receiving on the current prop is all, so here I am using a conditional operator, then give this button a class of active. Else if the current filter is something other than all, then give this a class of empty quotes. Similarly on our second button, let me copy this and paste it right here. So if the current filter is completed, then give this button a class of active, else give the class of empty quotes. And let us add it here as well. Lastly, if the current filter is pending, then we want to give this a class of active, else we want to give the class of empty quotes, or basically nothing. Now finally, let us head over to our homepage component, and right before returning our JSX code, let us create a new variable using the let keyword and name it as JSX, and set this to our initial exercises list when the default filter of all is applied. So let me cut this from here and add it right here in our JSX variable. Now here I want to add a couple of checks. So if the current filter that the user selects is set to completed, then let us set our JSX variable to this, and here we need to pass only those exercises to the exercises list component which are completed, so for which the complete property is true. So we can simply apply the filter method on the exercises that we are passing as a prop, and here I want to pass only those exercises for which the complete property is true. So we are keeping only those exercises for which the complete property is true. Now else if the current filter is set to pending, then let us set our JSX variable to the exercises list component, but this time I want to pass only those exercises that are pending to be completed. So exercise and bank exercise dot complete. So here we are basically passing those exercises for which the complete property is false. Make sense? Now back to our JSX. With these changes, we only need to render our JSX variable like this. So let us give this a whirl to see if this works or not. So here is our list of exercises for the all filter. If I click on the completed tab, then we get the exercises pertaining to the completed filter, and for pending we get exercises for the pending filter. Now I can also toggle this, so let's toggle it. So it is now gone from the pending tab to completed tab. I can toggle this exercise from completed to pending by clicking on toggle. So now this exercise goes to our pending tab, and then we can also delete our exercise by clicking on delete. So you can see everything works like a charm, and we can also add a new exercise. So let me say lorem ipsum and some dummy content here as well, and click on add exercise. We can also update our exercise. So back to push-ups and click on update exercise. So you can see each of our functionality works perfectly. So this was the entire implementation of our exercise tracker application. I know it was a very long video, but I hope you did learn a lot from this video. If you want more such videos on React, then let me know in the comments section. So please guys, if you liked the video, definitely leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's catch up in the very next one.